Next on Brute Force, the history of weapons at war. The grenade, rifle, helmet, and flak vest. This personal equipment of the soldier is his absolute last line of defense. From the World War I doughboy, poorly equipped for the slaughter of no man's land, to the soldier of the future, navigating across the battlefield like a vision from a science fiction film. Trace the remarkable evolution of this vital battle gear. Next on Brute Force, the history of weapons at war.
Even on today's sophisticated electronic battlefield, there inevitably comes a time when the individual soldier must face the deadly fire of his enemy. The equipment he carries into battle, his body armor and personal weapons, are his key to survival. On today's battlefield, a skillful use of strategic weapons may make the difference between victory and defeat. But for the soldier, his individual battle gear may make the difference between life and death.
This is the soldier of the future. The battle gear he is wearing is called SIPE, the Soldier Integrated Protective Ensemble. By interfacing man with machine, this experimental battle gear offers many new ways for the individual soldier to become more lethal. From protection against the elements to heightened sensory awareness, the capabilities of this combatant are described in words typically reserved for tanks and helicopters. This soldier packs remarkable mobility, protection, and firepower.
The next generation of combat gear will enhance the individual warrior. What it will do will make each soldier more capable, more lethal, and more survivable. And as that combat capability increases through the use of this technology, you will see one man in the future capable of doing what maybe a platoon or a company of infantrymen can do today.
Unlike battle gear of the past that was regarded as separate, unrelated elements, SIPE is an integrated modular head-to-toe fighting system. At the heart of the system is the SIPE helmet. It is fitted with a night vision image intensifier as well as a remote viewing system. By just pointing his weapon, the soldier receives thermal images on his visor's heads-up display. He can see around corners and through all battlefield conditions, smoke or fog, day or night. He can scan the battlefield to acquire or engage targets without exposing himself to enemy threats. For long-range listening, sensitive unidirectional microphones are mounted on his rifle. Again, by just pointing his weapon, he can detect personnel at 300 meters and vehicles at 1,000 meters. The SIPE soldier carries a powerful backpack-mounted computer, which includes a satellite global positioning system. He can, in seconds, determine his battlefield position to within 100 feet. Through his visor display, he can also view maps, check a digital compass, and even reference a data bank of information from first aid to enemy vehicle and weapon recognition.
The improved technology that we will see in the next few years will have a great effect on command and control of land forces. It will allow him, through this digital system, to receive orders, to pass reports, and to get a greater sense of situational awareness on the battlefield.
These warriors will be able to communicate soldier to soldier, and through a small video camera will be able to gather real-time battlefield intelligence and transmit it back to their commanders. In addition to its remarkable electronic features, SIPE also incorporates an array of protective elements against flame, chemical and biological agents, lasers, and extreme climate conditions. It also includes articulated body armor for ballistic protection. Developed by the U.S. Army Natick Research, Development, and Engineering Center in Massachusetts, the SIPE system is still just an experiment. Engineers continue to refine the technology as well as study the psychological factors.
What we're asking now is that if we develop this technology, is that the soldier will actually be masked from the real world, and he will be fighting the world inside his visor. And it will take some training and some adaptation of the individual soldier to get used to that, because it is a very, very human reaction to not want to fight with a mask on. So there's some interesting human dimensions to this that will have to be overcome. What we see with the SIPE technology is the beginning of the enhanced warrior technological revolution. It is awkward now, and it is difficult to maintain, and it will take a while before that technology is proven. But it will be proven, and it will be miniaturized, and at some point it will become standard fare of soldiers around the world.
The SIPE system is a remarkable feat of human engineering, the culmination of efforts that began almost a century ago. Prior to World War I, armies made the first attempts at human engineering to outfit soldiers with battle gear that allowed them to move efficiently and safely across the battlefield. Tests determined the load a soldier carries should not exceed 1/3 his body weight. The iron and leather battle gear of the past was replaced with lighter and more comfortable canvas web gear. Bright colors of the 19th century battlefield were replaced with khaki, olive drab, and field gray. Even experiments with new camouflage uniforms were carried out in the field. But in spite of these efforts, the soldiers of World War I experienced the grave deficiencies of the battle gear of their era.
Many of the uniforms in the First World War, particularly on the Allied side, the British and American uniforms, were really unsuited for the kind of close physical combat that was common in the First World War. They were very hot with their high lace-up collars. It was difficult very often for the troops to get enough ventilation to prevent heat exhaustion. Many of the uniforms were tailored to look fairly smart on the parade ground so that they were not baggy enough and loose enough to give full freedom of movement on the battlefield itself.
The American uniform was fashioned from heavy wool and was worn all year round. The clothing was uncomfortable and the quality control was poor.
The entrepreneurs in America grabbed onto the Army contracts, and they made millions on some of the lousiest made clothing that you ever saw. And no fitting. He didn't throw you out and says, here, try this on. He threw it at you, and that was yours. And we went around among the troop trading with each other. Let me try yours and try mine, see if it would fit you better. So I traded practically with somebody else for almost everything I had. I got but my shoes. My shoes luckily fit me.
The doughboys were issued just one uniform. It was to be used on parade, for training, and in combat as well.
All of us practically asked, well, what do we do our training and work in? He said that, right there. So in other words, we asked, we do everything in this uniform? Yes, sir. What if we go into a firefight? You wear the same uniform. What if we have to lay and crawl in the mud? Same uniform. It was ridiculous.
Battle gear will continue in a moment here on A&E.
Since the dawn of warfare, man has sought to protect himself from the weapons of his enemies.
As armies developed better skills, they developed more metal armor. And of course, in the Middle Ages, you see the epitome of metal armor in the armored knight. What's happened in the 20th century is that mobility is very important, and you cannot have an armored knight running around on the battlefield. He's too slow. He's a big target. But the helmet's important to protect him from artillery projectiles and from grenade fragments and all the fragments that are flying around on the battlefield.
When World War I first started, the development of the ballistic metal helmet was actually something that was not seen as important. Many armies went into battle with soft caps, and it wasn't until the first great battles of World War I that the commanding officers understood that many men were being injured from shell fragments, from overhead artillery bursts, and that better protection for the head would actually prevent a great many casualties.
If the bullets are on the trajectory where it was possible, they would skip, hit it, and knock your head off the side and go on sway. And everybody's helmet had dents from ricochets.
The Allied Army's pie-tin-style helmets were designed to protect against artillery barrages from above, but they offered little protection for the side and back of the neck.
The helmet was too shallow, and I had a man killed right next to me where he was hit in the back of the head. I don't know whether it was a bullet or shrapnel, but he was killed instantly.
The German army began the war wearing a polished leather helmet with a spike on top. The spike was only decorative and served no functional purpose. In 1916, they introduced an excellent steel helmet.
The German helmet was so beautifully designed. It covered the back of your neck, your ears. It was heavy. It's the only bad thing about it, very heavy, but once you slip that thing down over your head, you felt very secure. And I could have imagined that going across no man's land with that, it was far superior. We wish we had them.
Before the armies of World War I adopted steel helmets, 1 in 4 head wounds proved fatal. Afterwards, the fatalities decreased to only 1 in 7. World War I saw the introduction of technologically advanced new weapons. The airplane, the tank, the machine gun. But the soldier in the trenches still relied on the simple, proven technology of the bolt-action rifle. The mainstay of the American Army was the 1903 Springfield rifle. This reliable weapon was accurate to over 600 meters.
The Springfield 30-06 was an excellent firearm, well tested, Very good, very accurate. But now, here's one fault. The Springfield with the bayonet attached was about a foot shorter than the German rifle. They could stand off and stick you to pieces if all you had was a Springfield. Your Springfield would be about that far from hitting him, straight out like that. So we were given lots of instruction by the French instructor on how to overcome the shortness of our bayoneted rifle. We had to learn to be experts in fending off, so we got to be pretty good with maneuvering and slapping and using a rifle and a bayonet. It was the only way we could survive.
The German rifle was the Mauser 98. It too was accurate to over 600 meters.
The Mauser was at the time the most popular military bolt-action rifle in the world. It had been built for armies all over the world. The Mauser action was probably the best single military bolt-action rifle ever constructed. The Springfield rifle, in fact, was built to a Mauser license, and the Germans, Japanese, and Americans all used Mauser pattern rifles.
Another simple but invaluable part of World War I battle gear was a very old weapon, the hand grenade.
The term grenadier from the 1700s comes from a soldier who was given a bomb with a fuse to light and throw on the battlefield. Now the problem with these grenadiers was that the bomb was usually a little unreliable. So more grenadiers were blown up before they could throw their grenades, in many cases, than after the grenade landed. So grenadiers and the use of grenades kind of left the battlefield in the late 1800s and didn't really reoccur until you got into the trench fighting of World War I.
The Americans used the so-called pineapple grenade. The casing of this grenade was designed to explode into fragments. Battle-seasoned French and British soldiers taught the doughboys proper technique for tossing grenades, but the throwing action came naturally to the Americans.
That was one of my favorite weapons. I love grenades because I was a baseball pitcher. And in high school, I was the #1 pitcher on the high school team. And so I had very strong throwing arm. And you know, you don't throw a grenade like that. And there are no curves or underhand. You lob grenades with the entire shoulder and hand. And I got to be real good with a grenade. When they wanted somebody to dump a grenade in the trench, call Rocher, get him down here. I was going to dump a couple of grenades to be sure it was empty. So I love the grenades. I always had one, so I hung on my belt.
The close combat of World War I was brutal, and consequently some brutal weapons were devised as part of the soldiers' battle gear.
This is the French trench knife, a deadly instrument. You look at something like this and think about that going into your gut, or being hit in the face. Even a straight blow, like a right hook, would knock you out, tear your face up, mutilate you. And you stop to think of this, a human being using this on another human being. It's unbelievable.
Between the wars, America paid little attention to the lessons of World War I. The U.S. Army was ill-prepared for another conflict.
Up until the late 30s, the American combat soldier would have gone to war looking very much like the World War I trooper. Then, based on early results from the war in Europe, the Quartermaster Corps began developing new combat uniforms. We came to the realization that it was more efficient, if somewhat more costly in material, to have a dress uniform that was suitable for parade use, and also to have specific combat uniforms designed not to look smart, but to give better protection against the weather, greater freedom of movement, in some cases to be adaptable to different types of climate.
The new combat uniforms were tailored for a looser fit. The web gear was lighter and less restrictive. And finally, the ineffective flat helmet was scrapped and replaced with a new two-piece design.
The M1 helmet shell itself was formed from Hadfield sheet steel, and then an internal helmet liner was fitted that contained all of the webbing to fit the helmet to the soldier's head, and also carried one pair of straps. The second pair of straps was attached directly to the metal shell. On parade and in maneuvers, the helmets were often strapped under the chin. In combat, this was not considered appropriate because heavy concussion from nearby shell hits could, in fact, rip the helmet off the head, breaking the soldier's neck, or even, in some severe cases, almost decapitating it.
It was very good equipment. It was fairly lightweight and very effective. We had combat boots, which came up about halfway up your calf of your leg, and they were rough, untreated leather on the outside. They had a heavy composition sole about between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch thick, and they had a smooth leather top. And you put some kind of wax on them, it's supposed to keep them fairly waterproof. That was a good boot for the summertime, it was a good boot for the wintertime, up to a certain point. But they were not effective at all in the real cold weather. In fact, we got in the Battle of the Bulge, they just wasn't worth a damn. And these poor infantry soldiers standing in these foxholes all the time, their feet would get wet and they never got dry. And so that's fine to do it for a couple of days, but after 2 weeks of that sort of thing, your feet begin to swell. And they swell against that rough leather, and they can't swell anymore because there's no room in your boot. And the foot swells so much it cuts off the circulation, you develop gangrene. And that's what you call trench foot. And your feet turn absolutely black. And we had a number of men that lost both feet, or one foot, or parts of their feet. They never recovered from it. Later on, about the last 2 weeks of the Battle of the Bulge, they said, man, we got a good deal for you. So they brought it to shoe packs. And the shoe packs were a great big rubber boot that went about halfway up to your ankles. Then on top of that, it had an impregnated canvas that went above that and was laced up all the way. And the bottom of the shoe pack had a solid felt sole 1 inch thick. And you put 2 pair of socks on that 1 inch thick, and you can stand in sub-zero weather, freezing up to your rear end, and you can't feel it. They were terrific.
The development of German combat gear between the wars was largely an evolution of the World War I gear. Essentially, the German soldier in 1938 or 1939 was equipped with combat gear remarkably similar to what the German soldier had carried from 1916 to 1918.
Although based on the old design, the German battle gear was considered some of the finest of the war. However, it was heavier than other armies' equipment.
Altogether, that weighed about 60 pounds. Just the personal equipment, not counting the ammunition and the rifle. And in addition, each one had to carry one box with 300 rounds of ammunition for the light machine gun. So by the time we went on hiking, we had about 90 pounds to carry. And we were trained at the age of 17, walking 10 miles a day. Then next week we went up to 20 and so on until we reached about 40 miles a day with that equipment.
The German steel helmet of the Great War continued to serve the Army well in World War II.
They worked pretty good.
I got a shot underneath the rim of the steel helmet. The steel helmet had a turned down sort of a rim. Yeah, it's turned down, and the bullet went around it, and out on the front side. You could see it was ripped open all around. But they were pretty good, but a little heavy.
After World War I, the U.S. Army experimented with automatic rifles. These early tests led to the development of the M1 Garand.
The M1 Garand rifle was developed in the mid-1930s. It was adopted in 1936. It is generally considered to have been one of the finest semi-automatic rifles ever built. It was incredibly accurate for a semi-automatic rifle. The standard issue Garand rifle was quite capable of killing a man at over 500 yards. When issued for sniper use with a scope, it was considered standard to go for headshots at 400 yards.
For added firepower, the M1 Garand was also fitted with a grenade launcher attachment. Like their uniforms, the German rifles were also just refined versions of their World War I models.
The standard infantry weapon for the German soldier in World War II was the Mauser Model 98K infantry rifle. This is a slightly shortened version of the Mauser 98 that was used in World War I. It held 5 rounds in a permanent well magazine below the bolt. It was fed from the top with 5-shot stripper clips. It was a very accurate weapon, easy to use, well balanced, not very heavy.
Very, very accurate rifle. You just have to be calm and use it properly. If people are nervous and don't aim correctly, then of course the bullet goes anywhere. But I always preferred the bolt action because it forces you to aim after every shot instead of just pulling a trigger and not looking where the bullets go.
The U.S. forces supplemented their pineapple fragmentation grenades with incendiary grenades, smoke grenades, and phosphorus grenades. The Germans carried powerful grenades with wooden handles that the Americans nicknamed potato mashers.
We had a very bulky hand grenade, exactly the same as they had in World War I. It consisted of a soup can size explosive device on top, and then I would say about 9 to 12 inch long wooden handle. And on the end of the wooden handle you had this little ring to pull it, and then you could use this and throw it. Due to the fact that this was a whipping action, you could throw it pretty far. But it was extremely bulky, and we didn't like it at all.
During the war, soldiers faced extreme weather conditions. Often, only their resourcefulness and creativity allowed them to survive. The Germans were equipped with excellent battle gear, and their uniforms looked sharp, but they were ill prepared for the intense cold of the Russian front.
Soldier is supposed to be proud of a good appearance he's supposed to make in public. Whether this is useful, functional, the best for the function in a area, in a situation like I was in, this is a different question. The Russian had an ugly-looking uniform, but it was warm. And ours looked pretty, it was cold, it was much too thin. So they had no problem surviving these 80 and 90 below zero wind chill factors in comparison with us, where we froze to death.
Battle gear will continue in a moment here on A&E.
Bullet-resistant body armor was developed for use in World War II. Flak suits proved too heavy and cumbersome for the infantry, but the Air Corps adopted them for their bomber crews.
Since crews of aircraft did not have to undergo the same kind of physical exertion, such as carrying great weights over long distances, they would be able to use body armor.
Analysis of wounds inflicted on air crews revealed 70% were due to missiles of relatively low velocity, the kind that could be stopped by a flak suit.
The armored suits developed for the Air Force in World War II were largely successful in defending against both 88mm flak shrapnel coming in from outside the airplane, and occasionally from shells that exploded in the aircraft, and 20mm cannon shell fragments from enemy fighters.
The flak suits were built from manganese steel strips contained in canvas pockets on the vests. The helmets also contained overlapping steel strips. The flak suits were unwieldy, weighing over 17 pounds, but they were designed with a ripcord for quick removal if the bomber crews needed to bail out.
Thousands of these sets of armored suits were in use by the Air Force by the early part of 1944. There were numerous cases of air crew being hit in the head, in the torso, in the abdomen, and suffering only superficial wounds or sometimes no penetrating wound whatsoever, when unprotected crews in similar circumstances would have been killed or seriously injured.
The introduction of body armor reduced injuries in air crews by 60%, a point hammered home to the airmen by their wartime training films.
You'll be going on leave in a couple of days. Aren't you glad you wear your flak suit? Boy, am I. Just look at it. Look at these plates here. All I've got to show is a little tattoo mark.
Studies conducted during the Korean War found that 92% of the wounds were caused by fragments, primarily from mortars and grenades. The need for body armor was clear. In 1950, lighter, more flexible armored vests of Doron fiberglass and ballistic nylon were introduced for the infantry. The new 8-pound vests were found to reduce casualties by 30%. In 1952, the U.S. Army stepped up its efforts to use advanced technology to improve battle gear. The NATIC Research, Development, and Engineering Laboratory was founded near Boston, Massachusetts. NATIC's mission is to increase the survivability of the individual soldier in all environments. Much of NATIC's breakthrough work resulted in improved battle gear for soldiers in Vietnam. In 1961, a ballistic nylon liner was introduced for the N1 helmet, raising the protective level 15%. This improved design was credited with reducing casualties by 8% in Vietnam. Using new fabrics and materials, NATIC developed better flak vests for Vietnam helicopter crews. Based on the success of this design, armored vests soon became standard issue for the infantry as well.
The uniform is a steel pot and a flak jacket, and that's the whole way in the long bend. Now, I don't want anybody with their flak jacket or their steel pot off. Is that understood? Can anybody not hear that?
In Vietnam, flak jackets were extremely widely used. Almost everybody in combat, and even many rear echelon troops, used flak jackets because of the danger of mortar attacks and the like. It was not really effective against rifle ammunition fired from short or medium ranges, but it was effective against grenade and mortar shell shrapnel and pistol ammunition.
Men in mechanized and cavalry units tried to own 2 flak jackets. Riding along in an M113 armored personnel carrier, they wore one jacket and sat on the other to protect every part of their body. The extreme climate of Vietnam created unique challenges for battle gear designers.
It wasn't so much the war that I found hard. I found just everyday living hard. It was hot, it was cold, it rained, and it was just god-awful living out where the mosquitoes come along at night and pick you up and carry you away.
A new uniform was fashioned for the jungle heat. A lightweight load-carrying system was developed. Combat boots were redesigned for the tropical climate. The new boots were lighter, resisted moisture, and had a stainless steel insert in the sole to prevent penetration from punji sticks. Efforts were also made to enhance the senses of the soldiers. Most attacks on Allied positions occurred at night. To defeat the darkness, a family of night vision devices called starlight scopes were developed. These scopes could detect even the faintest light at a range of up to 1,200 meters and amplify it thousands of times. The smallest of these could be mounted on the M16 rifle. Unfortunately, the starlight scope's technology could be defeated by rain, fog, or smoke, all three plentiful in Vietnam. The Manpack personnel detector chemical, better known as the people sniffer, was devised to detect the presence of the enemy from the ammonia in his perspiration. Unfortunately, the sniffer proved too sensitive and picked up ammonia from other sources, including animal dung. At the outset of the war, American forces carried the M14 rifle. Introduced in 1957, the weapon was essentially an upgraded M1 Garand.
The M14 used the same round, the same gas-operated recoil mechanism, but they put in a 20-round magazine so that could be changed very quickly. They created some with selective fire, so you go full automatic, change the stocks from wood to composite so that the humidity and temperature wouldn't affect the accuracy of the weapon in a jungle environment.
Soon the troops received the controversial M16 rifle.
What would happen in this weapon, it has a complicated way to lock it into the firing position. And that area in the chamber could get fouled very easily. So you had to keep it clean. And if you didn't keep this clean, the bolt would come and not seat itself. And you can't clean a weapon during a firefight.
The weapon has gradually been developed. The problems of ammunition have been solved by redesign of internal components. Nothing has been able to equal the lightweight and the firepower that the M16 can generate. And the result is that now the rifle has completely left behind all of its problems and is considered a superb weapon.
Battle Gear will continue in a moment here on A&E.
Perhaps the greatest single breakthrough in the protection of the soldier came in 1965 with the discovery of Kevlar. This lightweight material has a tensile strength 5 times higher than the strongest steel wire. In fact, a Kevlar flak vest weighing just 1.5 pounds can stop a .38 caliber bullet at close range. But Kevlar wasn't invented to protect the soldier. It was engineered to reinforce the radial tires on your automobile.
This remarkable aramid fiber developed by DuPont has proven invaluable for its protective capabilities in modern battle gear. 7 layers of Kevlar can stop a .45 automatic round, and 28 layers can stop a .44 Magnum round. Kevlar vests and helmets are standard issue for today's forces. Combat vehicle crews also wear Kevlar helmets and Kevlar flak vests. In addition to its amazing ballistic protection, Kevlar is also resistant to flame, cuts, and a broad range of chemicals. The Kevlar helmet, developed by the Natick labs in the late 1970s, weighs just 3 1/4 pounds, but is up to 40% more resistant to fragments than its steel predecessors.
Hey! Move it out! We got third! Follow us in line! Hey, pass it down the line! Let's go! Pass it down! Pass it down! Follow us on line!
The individual soldier who transferred his old steel helmet to the dustbin of history and took on the new Kevlar helmet initially may have been a little bit annoyed at the fit of the helmet and complained that you couldn't wash out of your helmet now because you don't have an insert. What you've got in the Kevlar is all the webbing is put right inside. However, it wasn't until the invasion of Grenada that the true ballistic tests of the Kevlar helmet came out to every soldier to see. We had soldiers that were actually shot in the head by enemy rifles in the helmet and survived in ways the steel helmet would never have been able to protect them. So the Kevlar helmet was battle tested at Grenada. It was approved by the soldier after that operation, and there are very few soldiers on the battlefield today who'd want to give up their Kevlar helmet and go back to an old steel helmet if the artillery started to fly.
New protective materials such as Allied Signal's Spectra Shield are 10 times stronger than steel. These materials are very effective in preventing blunt trauma. The impact of a bullet on a flak vest is similar to the blow of a hammer. This blunt trauma can be as deadly as the bullet itself. Modern body armor dissipates the impact of the bullet over a wide area, greatly increasing the soldier's chance for survival. Throughout the century, we've seen incredible advances in technology, weapons, and battle gear. Today's soldiers march to battle with lightweight, durable combat equipment that would seem inconceivable to their ancestors. The primitive gas masks of World War I have developed into today's advanced chemical suits.
Got along, got along, got along.
Leather flight helmets and jackets have evolved into Nomex suits, capable of withstanding temperatures above 700 degrees. Binoculars and searchlights have developed into sophisticated night vision goggles and scopes. With technology moving so rapidly, with experimental systems like SIPE operational, one has to wonder if man will ever be totally replaced by robots on the battlefield.
War is a human endeavor, and when war becomes merely a battle between machines, and man is taken out of the loop, it'll no longer be war. It'll be something else, but it won't be war. The soldier on the battlefield is still the most critical element in conventional war. No matter what the situation, you can bomb the area, you can napalm it, you can turn it into glass, but unless you're willing to put your men in the mud and hold that ground, you don't own it. At some point, warfare will involve the use of robots. It'll be a few years until this becomes common practice in most armies. But whether it will ever replace man on the battlefield, whether a machine will ever be able to outthink, show more initiative, be able to endure, be able to survive, be able to adapt, improvise, and overcome, that's the question that has yet to be answered.
The quest to ensure the survival of the soldier on the battlefield is as ancient as warfare itself. Originally using armor of bronze and steel, today with a remarkable array of high-tech battle gear. Military designers continue to develop better methods of protection, but ultimately, the most valuable weapon soldiers carry to the battlefield are their commitment and their courage.
They were men you wouldn't want to mess with.
Our producers?
No, Elliot Ness and Babyface Nelson.
Oh, them.
Let's watch as they play cops and robbers through history tomorrow on Time Machine. So, how'd you like brute force?
I love a man in uniform.
Join us Wednesday for a look at Vietnam's most dangerous flight missions on an all-new air combat.
Hey, Wayne Rogers is hosting improv.
Let's grab some late-night laughs next on A&E.
It's time well spent.